Imagine being able to control 3D objects like this. In this tutorial, we are taking 3D animation to a whole new level. You will learn how to make 3D objects seamlessly react to text and other layers in ways you never thought were possible. Even though After Effects doesn't support this natively, I will show you some powerful techniques that will push the software far beyond its limits. This tutorial is loaded with powerful tricks that you don't want to miss. So let's get started. So we are going to start by creating one of the block elements that we are going to be using. So let's go to Composition and create a new composition. And from here, we're going to resize it to around 150 by 300. And I'm going to rename this to Animated Block. So okay, we can grab the rectangle tool and simply draw a quick rectangle. And I'm going to open this rectangle. And from rectangle path, I'm going to give it a value of 100 in here in terms of size. Make sure this is centered, so something like that. Move this layer to this place, and I'm going to change this to 3D. So change that to 3D. Let's rename this to block. Great. Now for this block, I'm simply going to open it, and I'm going to go to roundness, and I'm going to give it a value of around 10. And now I want to duplicate this. So Command D on your keyboard, and let's rename this to top. I'm going to hit U and U on my keyboard. This will open its settings, and for roundness, I'm going to give it a huge value, so something like 100 would be great, and this way our rectangle, as you can see, is now an ellipse. So we can now resize this. So if I go to rectangle path, I can scale this down. So we have the block and we have the top element, which is an ellipse. Now I'm simply going to parent the top element to the block, just like that. So now I need to pick the block, hit R on my keyboard, rotate the X rotation to around -55. And the Z rotation, we're going to rotate that to -45. And like that, we have like an isometric look for this cube. But one thing that we are noticing is that we have this warping happening in here. To get rid of that, we can make a new camera layer. So layer, new camera. And we want to give this a very high focal length. So something like 5000 should be good. Press OK. And like that, you can see that this is now much less warped. So now let's position the camera layer to the bottom, right over here. And I'm going to open this block layer and make sure that you are on the advanced 3D in here. So not classic 3D, just simply switch to advanced 3D from here. And we're going to go to geometry options. And from here, we're first going to change this to convex. And then extrusion depth, we're going to change this to 60. And make sure, of course, that this fits in the composition. So in this case, I'm going to just move it a little bit up. Now I'm going to change a bit the material options of this as well. So I'm going to go over here and I'm going to increase the specular intensity to 100%. And I'm going to increase the specular shininess to 60%. So now, of course, you are seeing some warping in here. Don't worry about it. We're going to fix it very quickly. Now let's go to the top and let's tackle that. So I'm going to go to the top right over here and I'm going to give this a specular intensity of 100 and a specular shininess of 60% as well. And I'm going to move this just a little bit up. So this is the top part of this cube. Now I want to extrude this as well. So let's go to the geometry options right over here. So I'm going to change this to convex. And this time the extrusion depth, we're going to give it something around this. This is perfect. We already have our cube done in here. So now let's introduce some lights. Let's go to layer, new, and let's go to light. From here, we're going to bring in a point light. You can change this from here if it's not on point and simply hit OK. So that's our first light. We can position this wherever we like. So in this case, I'm going to position this somewhere around here. If I hit P on my keyboard, I can position the Z axis from right over here. So I'm going to position it somewhere around here. And let's duplicate that. And now I'm going to create another one for the other side. And if we hit T on our keyboard, that will bring in the intensity of that layer. And we can increase or decrease however we like. And now we are going to introduce one final light. So let's go to layer, new, light. And from here, let's choose environment. Press OK. Now this light takes much more time to render, but it creates these very nice shadows right over here. And we can change the direction of that shadow. If we go on that light, hit R, we can simply rotate it And as you can see, we can create different effects with that shadow just like that. So that's our block. Of course, we can change its color and so on, but we will take care of that at a later stage. Now, before we continue, I wanted to humbly ask you to, if you could like and subscribe and even comment below. This will help me to reach more people. And of course, it will help me to actually create this free content for you. So please just do that right now and it will really help me. So now we can start using this. So let's go to main comp. And this is a simple composition in here. If I go to composition settings in here, it is a simple composition of 1920 by 1080. It can be any resolution for you. So just press OK. And I'm going to drag and drop that animated block inside of this empty composition. Now we need to create an isometric grid from this block. And the resolution of the actual final effect is determined by how many of these cubes we have in this composition. So we really need to take care of this. Of course, the more blocks we introduce, the slower it will become, and we risk crashing. So we're going to be very cautious as to how we add these blocks. Just follow this tutorial and you should be fine. So I'm going to simply resize this. I would like this to be of a higher resolution, so the blocks, I want them a little smaller. So 80%. And I'm going to move that anchor point. So let's open this and go to anchor point. And I'm going to move it so that it's exactly in the middle of the block. And now we are going to make the isometric grid. Now you can do this manually, so you can simply pick the layer in here, Command D on your keyboard, and start arranging these like this and arranging them in an isometric grid. But that would be super time consuming and you can never get that 100% correct. It's quite difficult to do that way. So to make your life simpler, I have actually made an expression for you, which you can simply copy and paste. So you can get that from a download link in the description, and you can simply copy and paste that. I'm going to show you how it works in a second. And if you would like to make this even quicker, I have also made a preset which you can download from the description as well. So let's get going. I'm going to delete this layer right over here, and I'm going to introduce an effector layer. So let's go to new, go to null object, and I'm going to rename this to effector. And make sure that the naming is 100% like this. It's very important. And now I'm going to go in here and bring in a slider control from the effects and presets. And I'm going to rename this to layers per line. And once again, make sure that the naming is exactly like this. And now it's a good time to say how many layers we want per line. So I would like to have like a resolution of 10 blocks per line. So I'm going to give it a 10. And now we can duplicate this. And we can change it to grid X. And let's duplicate once again. And this one is going to be grid Y. So in this case, the Y and X are capital letters. Make sure that those are like that. And this one is going to be X line spacing. Finally, we have Y line spacing. Those are the properties that we need in there. And now we can simply go to the document that you have downloaded, the PDF, and you can simply pick the isometric grid expression from here, copy, and we can go to the position here, hit P to reveal position, alt click on the stopwatch in here, and simply paste that right over there. And now we want to make sure that this animated block is the top layer, and we can start duplicating this. So if we duplicate this, we can see that the spacing is not correct. So let's go to effector, and now we can go to grid X and start playing with the placement of these. So in this case, I'm going to give this a value of 62. And the grid Y, I'm going to give it a value of 36. And we also have in here another line. We are not seeing it 100% in here, so we can increase the X line spacing. And let's make that 62 as well, since the block width in this case is kind of 62. And we have the line spacing in here. The Y line spacing, we're going to make that to minus 36. And once you have reached this stage, you can simply now duplicate this, Command D, however times you want. So, and like that, it works like magic, as you can see. You can simply duplicate them like those. Now, if you were using the preset, it's also very simple to do. So in this case, I'm simply going to find the preset from here, isometric, just type in isometric to find it. We're going to go to the effector layer, double click on the isometric grid maker effector, and it will create these properties automatically for us. And then we can simply go to the animated block and apply the position preset right over here. And now if we start duplicating these, we can start getting that grid. Of course, we need to fix the actual spacing of these. So the grid X in this case, it was 62. The grid Y was 36. This was 62. And this was minus 36. And then this one was 10. And this works just the same in here. You can simply duplicate these to create that grid. So that's how the preset would work if you were to get that. So let's jump back to our previous main comp and close this for now. And jump back to our previous main comp, and then going to continue duplicating these. But before, I'm just simply going to pick the first layer in here and position that around here, so that we start from this corner in here. And now we're going to go to the bottom layer, and let's continue duplicating them to fill in this whole composition. Let's duplicate a few more times in here, and that's good. Now, if we take a look at this composition in here, we can see that we have a lot of layers in here. We have around 300 layers in here, and I would like to reduce them slightly. And if you can see in here, we have also these black parts in here, which we haven't filled with layers. This is because I'm not going to put any animation on those, so I didn't want to actually make them like layers in here. So we are going to do a different approach for those, just to make sure that After Effects doesn't freeze, basically. So first, we want to pick all of those expressions that we have added to create the isometric grid in here and basically remove them. But we want to keep the position value. So to do that, let's pick all of these layers. Now, in your case, you might need to pick less, so I would advise to actually do this in steps, make 100 layers at a time. And now, before I do this step, I'm actually going also to reduce the size of this composition. So I'm going to just pick a few frames in here, just around, let's say 5 frames in here, hit N on your keyboard, and we're going to trim comp to work area. Once again, this step is just to make sure that After Effects doesn't freeze, since we are working with a lot of layers. So now we're going to hit Alt and Shift and P on our keyboard, so Option Shift P on my keyboard, and this will create a position keyframe. So wait for it to create that frame. Of course, in your case, you might need to pick less layers just so this doesn't freeze. So we have done that. Now we can right click in here, go to Keyframe Assistant, and click on Convert Expressions to Keyframes. Once again, if this step is a bit difficult for you, just pick less layers. So you might need to pick like 50 layers at a time. So there we go. It have actually created the keyframes for all the layers in there. Now we're simply going to hit backspace on our keyboard to delete all of those keyframes. And once we have removed all of those keyframes, we're going to simply go to a stopwatch in here with everything selected as it is, hold Alt on our keyboard and click on the stopwatch. And this will remove all the expressions from all the layers. And basically now we have layers that doesn't have any expressions on them. So now I need to pick these layers in here, pick any layer that has the anchor point that is outside of the composition here. So in this case, if I pick a little bit more, these are in here, but if I pick less, so these are out, as you can see, and I'm going to delete those, just like that. And let's do the same for the bottom layers in here. So these ones in here doesn't go in exactly in here, so I'm going to delete those, and I'm going to do the same for the top right corner. So let's do that. And pick these, delete, let's check this one, and this one has the anchor point inside in here, so don't worry about it. Now our isometric grid is almost done. Now let's fill in these black parts right over here. So to do that, we need to pick 4 blocks that are next to each other. So we need to pick, let's say, this one, and we need to pick this one, and we need to pick that one. So we have picked those 4 blocks. It's a bit hard to pick them, but don't worry, just try to get in there. So now with those four blocks, we can simply duplicate those. Command D on my keyboard to duplicate them. And with those 4 blocks selected, I'm going to pre-compose these. So right click and go to pre-compose from right over here. And this is going to be renamed to RepeTile. Click OK. And there we have it. We have these 4 blocks now in a new composition. Make sure that you have duplicated these before. And now I'm simply going to pick all of those 4. Make sure they are in the middle. And now let's go to composition, go to composition settings. And from here, we're going to resize this. So let's go to width, and we're going to give that a width of around 1:4. And the height, we're going to give it 72. If you have different sizing for the cubes, this might differ for you. The important thing is that basically these are aligned in a way here, exactly in the middle. So like this, these are completely centered, and we need that kind of X in the center in here. So now let's go to back to the main comp, and we have the repeating tile in there that we have just pre-composed. So let's bring that to the front and just solo it for now. Bring in an effect in here named RepeTile. Now we're going to simply expand right, expand left, and do the same for expand down and expand up. And like that, we have an isometric grid that basically is just repeating these cubes. Now, this is just one layer in here. We can position it right under the other blocks, and this part is going to be static. So to make sure this doesn't move, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go and right click in here, go to time, and click on freeze frame. And now I can just grab that repeating tile in there, and I can move it just to match these edges in here. So I'm looking at that part. I'm just looking to match those cubes completely in here. So in this case, this is perfect. They match perfectly. The next step is to actually mask this so that this is seamless. So to do that, I'm going to pick a new layer here, layer new, and let's go to solid, rename this to tile matte 1. And now let's hide that for a second in here. Let's make sure that it is selected and pick the pen tool. And now I would like to mask. So basically I would like to apply it on this part. So I created just a quick line with the other blocks in there, and we can just close this off like that. And now if I show that, you can see that we can only see that part. I'm also going to do the same for the other part, the top part. The top part doesn't have to be that precise, so I'm just going to remove the repeating tile for now, just so we can see it. And let's pick the tile matte, hit V on our keyboard so that we pick the pointer tool, and we can move these up like this. And then I'm going to move this to somewhere around here, and this to somewhere around, let's say here, and this one right over here. So we have two layers. One is showing the bottom part in here, and one is on the top part right over here. So let's rename this to tile matte top, and the other one to tile matte bottom, just so everything is organized. Now let's pick that repeating tile, let's show it, and I'm going to toggle this switch in here, go to track matte, go over this, and I'm going to select tile matte top. And that basically takes that layer that we have done and uses its transparency. So if we solo this repeating tile is only showing at this top part right over here. Now if we duplicate this repeating tile once again, we can change this to tile matte bottom, and now this will show just on the bottom part in here. So if we solo this one, now that is showing on the bottom. Now what I need to do is the bottom layer in here, just place it on top like that. And now we can see that that is on top in there, and the edge is seamless in there. You can go over both of these mattes in here, hit F on your keyboard, and we can feather them slightly in here, just so that the edge is completely seamless in here. So now the isometric grid is done. That was quite a process, but remember we have done 300 layers in here, so it's a lot of work, and we have done that quite quickly for 300 layers. So let's now start animating. This is going to be the fun part. It's going to be quite simple. So let's just get on with this part. So now the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go to composition, and from here we're going to go to composition settings and make sure that this main comp has actually some more duration. So I'm going to give it a duration of around 15 seconds. And let's now expand this like this and pick all of these layers, and I'm just going to make sure that they fill the whole composition like that. That's the first step. Now to animate this, we have actually two options. We can pick each individual layer and animate that, or else we can animate one layer and then replicate that animation for all the other layers. In this case, since we have many layers, I'm just going to do the animation on one layer, and that is going to be replicated on all the other layers. In the end, I'm also going to show you how you can apply the animation to individual layers. So if you have less layers, you can also do that. So let's start with this part. Let's go to the animated block right over here. And I'm going to create a very simple animation here. So let's pick the block from here and hit P on my keyboard and just click on the stopwatch. Let's make sure that the timing of this is just around 2 seconds. Doesn't need to be more. So hit N on my keyboard and trim comp. Let's make it like a little bit more, like 2 seconds and one frame, and trim comp to work area. So now go to the last frame and we're going to move it up. Great. So very simple, as you can see, just a simple move like this. Now I'm also going to animate the color of this. So let's pick both of these layers. I'm actually going to change these to black, to somewhere around this. And I'm going to open these. Let's hit U and U to find the color. Toggle the stopwatch of that color. And make sure that we toggle the stopwatch of the second color as well in here. And let's go to the last frame in here. And I'm going to change that color as well. So somewhere around here. Like that, we have a very simple animation where from black it goes to purple. Now, once you have this single animation ready, the ideal thing to do is to actually render this out, and this would help the next process to be much faster in terms of rendering and execution. So let's go to composition and add to render queue. And from here, we're going to select the following settings. So let's go to QuickTime, and then we're going to select RGB plus alpha, make sure that the alpha is on in there, and simply hit OK. Then you can select the output destination and give it a name and simply hit save, and then simply render. Great, and now when it has rendered, simply go back to the animated block in here, and we're simply going to drag and drop from our Explorer in here, right over here, and you can solo that. And now we have this very quick animation in here that is happening like that. Of course, you can skip this step, but I really recommend this since this will make your life much easier at the next stage. Let's go back to main comp, and we have this animation right over here. So this is not exactly what we wanted, so we have the animation happening on all of the layers, so let's tweak that. First, what we're going to do is we're going to introduce a layer that will actually control the animation. If you see the first part, we had actually a layer that wherever the white parts were, the animation was happening. So let's introduce that. Let's go to composition and go to new composition, and I'm going to rename this to image source. Make sure that the naming is like this, and the resolution, it needs to be 100% like the main comp in here. Let's press OK. So now I'm going to introduce the text that is going to actually do the animation. So let's click on the text tool and type in here text. So in this case, if I pick this up in here, I'm actually using this font in here named Kofu Sans Pixel. Of course, you can use any font, but I chose this font since it has already these like pixel look in here, which will make our text look nicer in the end, basically. I'm going to resize it somewhere around here, and now let's turn this to 3D. This one doesn't have to be advanced 3D, so it can be the usual classic 3D, but the important thing is to rotate this. So let's hit R on our keyboard, and we're going to change this to -55 and -45 right over here. So this is to match 100% what we were doing before with the cubes. And as you can see, we have some warping in here. So let's go to layer new camera and make sure that the focal length is very high. So something like 8000 would be great. Press OK. And now this is completely straight. Perfect. So that is done. Now, one final thing that we need to do is I'm going to go to layer new in here, and I'm going to introduce a new solid. This is going to be background black, and it's just going to be a black background underneath everything right over there. So that's our image source done. Now let's go back to the main comp and let's bring in that image source. So let's place that right over here, and we can simply hide that it is right over here, but we can hide that, and since we are going to use it only for the animation. So now we are going to go to the animated block, and we're going to right click and go to time and go to enable time remapping. And once we do that, we can see that it extends our layer. It doesn't have an end anymore. And if we look at this value in here, it is changing from 0 to around 2. So that is the whole animation that is happening in there. Now, if you remember, we have done that effector layer earlier. So I'm going to pick that. I'm actually going to place that right on top in here just to keep it reachable. So, and now let's go to effect controls, and actually, these ones, I don't need them anymore since we have actually baked those expressions, so I'm going to delete those, and I'm going to start introducing new properties in here. So let's just introduce a new slider in here, and this is going to be very simple. Just make sure that the naming is 100% like this. So the first one is going to be sharpness, so let's duplicate. The second one is going to be property from, and the next one is going to be property to. These are the attributes that we need in this case. And as always, I have done an expression for this, which you can simply copy and paste. You can find this in the description right below. And I've also created a preset for this, which you can get if you'd like to try that. It has many more features, but more on that at a later stage. So let's go over this first one here. Let's go to the time remap in here. I'll click on the stopwatch, just like this, and simply paste in this expression, just like that. So now we can simply copy this time remap value, so Command C on your keyboard, and we can pick around 100 layers in this case, so that After Effects doesn't freeze basically, and simply paste it right over here. And we're going to pick the remaining layers, so these would be the layers, and paste over those as well. Let's see what we have in here. If we go to the effector now, we can give it some values. So if you remember, for the time remap, we had, if we go, let's open that, we had the value at the start was at 0, and it was up to around 2. So for the effector in here, we have to set the property from 0, and the property 2, we need to set it to 2. So there we have it, it is working. Of course, right now we are not completely seeing this. That's because of the sharpness. So right now the sharpness is set to 0. If we increase the sharpness slightly, we can start seeing this being more visible. So if this is set to 0, it is kind of blurry. If the sharpness is set to 100, it is 100% visible in there and takes the sharpness of the text 100%. I'm just going to click on this toggle in here to lock this composition here, and I'm going to click on this and click on New Comp Viewer. Now I have 2 different comp viewers. And now I'm going to go to the actual image source that we have done, and we can see this in action. So if I move this, that one moves. And now if we want, for instance, to decrease the opacity of this layer, we can see that this would be like less visible. So now we can go to this image source in here, and we can simply animate the opacity from a 0 to a 100, for instance. And now if I can simply close this panel and hit unlock on that one. Now if I go to main comp, we can see this animation where the blocks go up in here, because it is taking that opacity of that layer. And as you can see, it's quite fast as well in this case. And now the cool thing about this is that actually this is taking the animation from the animated block. So you can do any animation in here that you like, and this would be replicated in that effect. So for instance, in this case, I have another example in here. So let's bring that example in here, and let's remove that for now. I have this example where I have an ellipse instead, and it is actually rotating. So now if I go to main comp, I can see how that actually looks. So in this case, it has rotating ellipses just like that. Now to give you a bit more flexibility with this, I have also created a preset that you can apply very quickly to your layers, and that you can apply to any property of your layers. So I'm going to show you how this works very quickly in here. In this case, I have this very simple setup in here with 3D layers. These are all in 3D. If you'd like to see how you can do this, I'm also going to leave a link at the end of this video for a tutorial just on that. And in this case, just to show you very quickly what I have in here, I have this image source that is actually a simple wave in here, animation, I have this white. So now basically what's going to happen is the animation is going to happen on this white right over here. So let's now pick the effector, and I'm going to go to effects and presets, and here are my presets that I have in here. And the first thing that you need to apply is this effector. So in this case, it's already applied. Just double click on this and apply it to the effector. And it will show up right over in here. And then here we can see the settings that we have. First, you have the option to choose an image source. So you can just choose an image source. In this case, I'm going to select that image source that we had before, named image source 3D layer scene in the end in here. And now if I open affected properties in here, we can see the properties that we can control. Now by default, these are not on the layers in here, so we would need to apply them with whatever we like. So for instance, if I would like to use the rotation, I can simply pick the layers in here, go to the presets in here and find, in this case, image-based Mograph 3D rotation. Just double click on that, wait for it to apply. We can now go to the effector and we can change the rotation. In this case, I have already changed it to around 180. So let's see the animation of that. Very cool. So now let's do the same for the position. Let's go over all the squares in here. and I'm going to add the 3D position. So double click on that and apply the preset. And now if I go to the effector, I can just tweak the position in here to whatever value I like. Let's say I would like them to be like that. So I'm now tweaking just the Z position. And if I play that, you can see that working like that. So this is a very cool option if you are playing with a less amount of layers. So in this case, I only have 20 layers. This is why I'm using this. So, and it gives you much more versatility, as you can see. So if you would like to get that, you can find a link in the description for these presets right over there. And you also have the option to add the color option. In this case, I have already added this, as you can see, and you can tweak the colors from here very simply, just like this. Color from and color to. Of course, you can give it any color, just like that. And we can play that. And you can see the versatility that this offers, basically. So that is basically it, guys. You can find all the links in the description for the expressions and also for the presets if you would like to get those. And in here, I'm also going to leave a link for this video where we can see how we can do this cool effect where objects react to this other object that is passing right over it. So just check this out if you'd like to see how that is made.